Today's program is going to be as much as an hour in length, depending on how long the questions go, but we have plenty of time for questions today. We recommend, if you have those questions, to use the Q&A box. In the Q&A box, there's an option to thumbs up a question if you see one that you would like answered. And we will be taking questions in the order of preference from attendees. So the questions that have the most thumbs up, we'll be taking first. And we'll try to get through all of them as much as we can today. Today's program will be recorded in full, so you'll be able to access it at youtube.com/calpreservation or at facebook.com/capreservation. We'll also be broadcasting live to LinkedIn, so you can access the recording there even after the program if you'd like to watch portions of it later. If you have any issues with Zoom, you can always hop over to the YouTube or Facebook channel to watch the program. We'll be looking at social media channels as well for any questions from audience members. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to ask questions. I've also enabled the chat for attendees, so you can let us know where you're from in the chat box and also what you're interested in hearing more about today or what sort of questions you'd like answered. And we thank you for your time today, and we look forward to starting the program. We'll get started here in about 3 minutes. Today's program will also be captioned, so if you notice on your screen there might be some captions. If you would like to disable that, you can always click on the hide caption button on the bottom of your screen. We also will be allowing people to raise their hand, so if you would like to ask a question in person of our speakers, we would simply keep an eye out on the list of attendees for anybody who raises their hand, and we can enable your microphone. And you can ask your question with the speakers in person. Otherwise, you can use the Q&A box for your questions. This is part of a 3-part series. You'll see on the screen here, part 1 was movie magic on 2 theaters restored. Part 2 was 2 cities and 2 solutions. And today is part 3, which would look at hotels in California. The 2 hotels today being featured are the Hotel del Coronado and the Proper Hotel in Coronado and Los Angeles, respectively. And we have 2 speakers today, David Marshall and Morgan J. Bush. Today's program will start first with David, and then we'll have Morgan speak, and then we'll close with questions. So feel free to ask your questions as early as you'd like. We will be keeping an eye on the Q&A box for questions, and we'll be taking those in preference, in order of preference from the attendees, and whichever ones are asked first. So we do recommend you ask those questions early. We'll start here in about 1 minute. Okay, welcome everybody to today's program. My name is John Haber. I'm the Field Services Director for the California Preservation Foundation. We have a special co-moderator today, Emi Takahara from the University of Southern California. She's a student at USC, and she'll be helping us with questions. So Emi, do you have anything to say?
Hello, welcome.
Great. Well, nice to have you here today. We also have 2 speakers today. Today's speakers will be David Marshall from Heritage Architecture. He'll be speaking on the Hotel del Coronado, and he'll be our first presenter. We also have Morgan J. Bush from Omgivning, and he'll be covering the Proper Hotel. So we're looking forward to seeing these projects, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. As mentioned earlier, we recommend you use the Q&A box for those questions. You can also let us know where you are in the chat box. We look forward to seeing your comments and questions. and we'll get going right away here. First, we're going to turn it over to David Marshall for the Hotel del Coronado. I'm really looking forward to seeing this project, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. So thank you, David, for coming today.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just grab. Again, I'm David Marshall. I'm an architect in San Diego. Our firm is Heritage Architecture and Planning, and we do specialize in historic preservation. And it was a huge honor to work on a project at the Hotel del Coronado. It's one of the best known historic buildings in San Diego County and in Southern California, and it's one of the last remaining kind of seaside resort hotels in the country. And it's very much intact and well preserved. If you don't know, Coronado is just across the bay from San Diego, so it's its own city within the county of San Diego. A little bit about the history of the building. We have to honor the original architects, the Reed brothers. They were out of Indiana, and James and Watson. James in the photo there was the primary architect on the project. And did a terrific job, and we owe him a debt of gratitude for creating the building that we love so much today. The interesting thing we found is there were a lot of ink and linen drawings of the original design, and they were all dated the same year as the construction period. So it was pretty clear that the design was going on during construction. So when the contractor needed a certain railing or a certain roof, they would start working on their ink and linen drawings and crank it out the door. They probably had offices on site, as most of the workers also lived on site. The concept of the hotel was a large resort hotel built around a tropical courtyard. There's a 1 acre courtyard in the center of the building. 399 guest rooms when it first opened. And construction, believe it or not, was completed in 11 months. It took us about 2 years just to work on part of the building and restore it. So that's a pretty amazing accomplishment. This is an image of one of the ink on linen drawings that are stored on site. Many of these had not been really organized, or frankly, a lot of them were rolled up and stuck in corners of the building, and it wasn't until recently when many of them were discovered. This is one of the gables above the entry stairs. And as you can see, this JWR is James W. Reed, signed off his okay on this sheet before it went off to the contractor. A couple historic photos showing construction. It is an entirely wood frame building. A lot of balloon framing was used. You can see the tents in the foreground where the workers slept. There were over 250 workers on any given day. And the Dell, even today, is the second largest wood structure in the United States. The only one that's larger is a blimp hangar up in, I believe it's Oregon. The Dell here, historic photo. This is right after it was completed. This is looking at the primary facade, the entrance on the south elevation. You can see this great porch, or veranda as we call it, 2 sets of stairs, and this grand chimney. All of those features I just mentioned were missing. They had been removed and altered over the years, and so part of our goal was to get those back as much as possible. This is another view looking across the veranda. You can see it has a wood floor, the gentleman in the bowler hats and the rocking chairs, and also notice there are some stained glass windows above the entry doors here, and this ridge cresting on the ridges of the roofs that were a prominent feature that had also been lost. So this is what the building looked like when we started. This is 2019. This is while we were still documenting the building. This is that same front facade. You can see there's no open veranda anymore. Not only had it been filled in, but it had been extended about 30 feet further south, where they extended the veranda, then they filled it in, then they extended it some more, filled that in. And so what we ended up with is basically just this windowless or almost windowless wall with fake columns in front to try to simulate what it used to look like, but it really was not very effective. You could also see a porte cochere that was added. This one is from the 1980s. It had a stucco ceiling with recessed fluorescent lights. It really did not have a nice Victorian feel to it. So that was all part of the remodel work. And then also we had an added wheelchair ramp that was also redone. So this floor plan view shows the original building architecture in blue. Somebody's got some clinking dishes there. If you could please mute, thank you. We have the original floor plan in blue, and then we have the black lines are what the building looked like at the start of our project. Well, actually it extended even further, but what we were able to do is recreate the front facade in yellow here, but we had to do it about 15 feet further south because there were some critical infrastructure spaces like the main computer room and the other reception and office areas that needed to stay. But the area in red is the footprint of the veranda. You can see how large it is, and that includes the 2 stairs. The stair on the left, by the way, was for single ladies only, and the stair on the right was for married couples and gentlemen. This one led right into the ladies' billiard room and ladies' lounge. But we felt it was important to bring back both of those original stairs. And you can see this is the new disabled access ramp that we added. We decided to give it that shape, not only to differentiate it from the rectilinear original Victorian design, but it also gave us opportunities to introduce landscaping between each of the legs of the ramp, which really helped dissipate its visual impact. In addition to the ground floor remodel of the veranda, we ended up doing a lot of work on the south facade related to windows. Here you can see the number of windows that were involved. There were over 100 windows that had to be replicated, which you see in purple. All the yellow windows remained because they were either historic or they had a historic look. And then we had 25 stained glass windows, only 4 of which had survived. 21 needed to be recreated from photographs. Those are in green. And one of the largest stained glass window, which was relocated, is shown in orange here, and I'll be talking about that later. We also have rooms out to the guest room balconies on this facade, or doors, I should say, and those doors are shown in blue. Interestingly, even though there were balconies, there were no original doors on those rooms. They actually had, you would lift up the lower sash of the window and you'd climb out through the window to get to your balcony. Well, the building department doesn't really appreciate that these days, so we had to provide doors in those locations. I talked about the stained glass windows. These are just some excerpts from historic photographs showing where stained glass windows used to occur. Some are more clear than others, but we didn't have great resources in order to recreate them. We had maybe about 50 to 60% of the information we needed. So we had to extrapolate the design based on Victorian principles. And of course, the color of the glass had to be based on the original windows that had survived and other Victorian precedents. So we went through a design exercise with a local stained glass company called Barra Stained Glass Studios. And we went through the 6 different designs for the windows and worked with them on selecting the glass and refining the design to make sure that they were actually able to be manufactured. And these were not part of the required master plan that the Hotel Del was following for the restoration of the facade. But once we told the ownership, BRE Resorts, about how many windows there were, they were kind of excited about doing this, and they added this to the project in order to recreate all of these windows. And these are some photographs of the completed windows in place in various locations. There's quite a variety of colors and styles. And And again, they're all based on those black and white photographs you saw. And in order to clarify that these are not original windows, we had the studio in the lower right here. You can see they etched their name in the lower right-hand corner of all of the new replica windows with the name of the studio and the year 2021 when they were completed. So that will allow future historians to recognize them as replica windows. The one of the 4 original windows that survived was the largest stained glass window, known as the coronation window. It had actually survived, but it had been moved around several times. This is the window on the left. You see, this is where it was installed on the 4th floor in this kind of backlit box. And they actually turned it around. So the inside facing was now facing the exterior. That was because it was no longer visible from the interior. But in this location, it was actually subject to a lot of heat. It was kind of in a hot box on the south facade. And so there was additional cracking and damage to the lead caming that was caused and had to be repaired. So this center photo shows the window. All 700 pieces of it were dismantled, documented first, obviously, dismantled, and then reassembled using new lead caming. You can see a part here that's still being assembled. And over here we had a woman's figure. Her right arm had several breaks in it, and we replicated that with a new piece of glass. There were about 5 or 6 pieces that were replaced, but for the most part, all of the original pieces were installed. This is the window as it was being brought back for reinstallation, and it's ready to be craned into place. And this is the final installed window. It's back in its original 2nd floor location, and it has been turned around to face the proper direction. So it's facing the inside of the lobby at the 2nd floor mezzanine. And this entire wood surround had to be recreated. That was missing. There had been a guest room that had been added in this area of the building that we removed to make this an exterior wall once again. And then even though we weren't able to replace the entire grand chimney, we wanted to bring the brick back on the first 2 floors because it was an important context, and it was the original wall material in those 2 areas. So we brought back this replica brick, complete with all the interesting texturing that occurred, and we did that on both floors. Another thing that we were bringing back that had been lost were the light fixtures. This is the best photo we had of one of the box lanterns that used to be at the top of the stairs. And you can see one of the stained glass windows behind it, by the way. So we didn't know exactly what it looked like, but we had the general configuration and size. So we had located this fixture on the right. We had purchased it from an estate in England. It was from the same period, and it was Victorian in style. Excuse me. And so we used that as kind of our model, but we did an enlarged version of it for the final assembly. And this is the one we ended up with. You can see it's got a faux gas pipe with a little knob here, because this was a combination gas electric fixture, as they all were when the hotel was first constructed in 1888. Another fixture that we replicated from scratch from old photographs was this other gas electric fixture. This upper one was the gas light portion, and this lower one was where the electric light was. Of course, it's fully electric now, LED, but we had several good photos of this fixture, and so these ones were replicated by a company called Kirkman Lighting, and they're up in northern San Diego County. And we had about a dozen of those manufactured for the front veranda, and 2 of the fixtures on the left were recreated. The project involved a lot of structural work as well. We were opening up parts of the lobby that had been enclosed by they had made them basically office areas with that were not exposed to the public. We wanted to bring those back as public areas, and so we had to remove a bunch of steel columns that had been added in that area. You can see one in the background here. So these are the construction workers putting in some shoring so this could be stabilized, and there was new steel framing that was involved in the lobby restoration. The structural engineer was KPFF, by the way. One of the things we discovered in the lobby is that the original woodwork, where were some original remnants, that this shows the original stain and shellac. Many of the areas had been painted over with brown paint. You can see down here, and also areas here where you see brown paint that's been stripped away. And this railing, you can see this newel post still has brown paint on it. So not only had it been restained in many areas, changing the color, but we had lost the wood grain by them just applying this paint. So we went through a very involved process of making sure we had the original finish identified, and then a crew up on scaffolding for many months, completely stripped down to the original white oak. And this is during the installation of the new stain and varnish to match. So that was quite an involved process, but you could see what one of the columns looked like when it was just had brown paint on it. That was not satisfactory for what we wanted to do. So if you visit the lobby today, you will see all of that beautiful wood grain again. And this is a view taken after the restoration. The area in the background is the front desk area. You can see the keys on the hooks in the background and the front desk. This was where all the enclosed workstations were for the back of house front office staff. And that has now been, this is the former ladies' billiard room, which is now exposed. And then the wood coffered ceiling that was there, similar to what you see above, was also fully, it was dismantled and then reassembled. One of the discoveries we made early on is looking at old photographs. We could see that the window sashes, which were white at the time we started the project, used to have a dark color. And of course, with paint, you could usually find it buried underneath the later layers. So with our paint investigations, we determined that the original sashes were a dark red. This Sherwin-Williams Rookwood red was the best match. And so all of the sashes were brought back to that color. And even though we were focused on the south facade of the building, that's the only facade that has the red sashes on it today. But the hotel is working with us on restoring the remaining facades of the building, so it will all look as it did in 1888 with the red sashes. Another design detail we have here is the railings. This great railing design in the black and white photo, which is inspired by a Japanese, railing. It's got the mix of the horizontals and the verticals. Unfortunately, it was far from being code compliant. As you can tell, it was only 29 inches tall rather than 42. And then the openings were definitely larger than 4 inches. Some of them were almost as large as 7 inches. So how do you bring back a historic guardrail that is so non-compliant? Well, we considered a lot of options, and we decided that the best way was to introduce a frameless glass guardrail behind the historic reproduction of the original railing. So we cheated a little bit, and we boosted up the historic railings with a 6-inch curb, but that also helped us hide the shoe of the support for the cantilevered glass railing. And so we were able to get a little more height out of the historic railing, but still keep the original look. We didn't want to use steel cables or metal mesh, or we didn't want to modify the spacing of the pickets to meet code, because that would have not looked anything like the original. So we basically just did this layered approach, and it really has been very successful in achieving the historic look while still meeting the code requirements. Much of the new work on the veranda was done out of the primary framing was done out of steel. And again, the structural engineer was KPFF, but we didn't want the steel to be exposed, because it was important that we matched it up to the original wood frame building. And so we ended up cladding all of the wood. You can see these pipe columns here were all clad in wood. They would basically turn these columns, they'd slice them in half, they'd route out the middle, and then they'd sandwich the original steel pieces. You can see the horizontals are not yet in place. But this was very successful, and the beam above here has already been wrapped in wood furring. So if you go out to the Dell today, you will not see any exposed steel. It's all been clad in wood to bring back that original look and feel. A couple other details I want to address here. We have these really interesting shaped rafter tails, which were done that way because they have they receive the rain gutters, which you'll see in some later photos. Those were all brought back. The beadboard was replicated for the ceilings of the porches. The ridge cresting originally, historically, it was wood, and that's one of the reasons it didn't last very long. It's exposed to a lot of weather and sun, and so we decided to use PVC, which is a very durable material. It's very stable, and we think it will probably last longer than probably any other material on the entire building. So this ridge cresting is here to stay. We also introduced a void space between the ceiling of the veranda, which is exposed to below, and the roofing. This is a 4-inch space you see, and it enabled us to conceal all of the fire sprinkler piping, and also the lighting conduit and the speaker wires and security lighting and all that kind of stuff. So that enabled us to keep a really clean ceiling in all of those areas. And this right-hand photo shows a original column that was actually discovered during demolition. They had filled in all these balconies on the second floor, but luckily they had left the columns in place because they were structural after all. And so we were able to reuse about 6 or 8 of these, but the ones that were missing were replicated in Douglas fir, which you see in the unpainted examples here. So I want to finish up with some before and after views that really, I think, show they're all taken from the same angle, so you can really see they're going to fade from one to the next, but you'll really be able to see the effect of the restoration and how it transformed the south facade to its original appearance. So here we have 2018, again, the infilled veranda and the old porte cochere. And also notice the upper floor windows. Many of them, they're not the double hung historic units. They were replaced by horizontal picture windows. And if we go to the restored facade with the red window sashes, you can see the wheelchair ramp in the center, the 2 stairs, and the more Victorian looking porte cochere. And this is a view from the other side of the porte cochere. This is where they originally had their valet booth, which we've moved, and they had a baggage cart storage area that we also got out of the way, but you can see the original porte cochere and the big clunky square column they had. And also note where that coronation window was on the 4th floor. Today it's down here. We removed this entire added room that was glommed on in the 1940s, and this is the same view today. And all of those railings have the glass behind them, but it's, as you can see, it's very difficult to see, which was the idea. This is a view looking from the front entrance down through the center of the porte cochere. That building at the end was the VIP check-in area, and we got rid of that as well. And so this is what the new looks like. Now you can see out to the bay, Glorietta Bay, and the entrance beyond. The fountain was added by the landscape architect. A couple more here. These were the main entry doors prior to the project. They were not historic. They did not resemble what was there historically. And this is the new 2 pairs of entry doors that were original replicas. And you can see the stained glass that was also reintroduced above. And a couple interiors to finish up. This is a view from the mezzanine looking down into the lobby. This is the dingy carpet and brown paint version. We went in with a new oak flooring, new carpets, and of course the new stain and shellac. And this is a view from the mezzanine looking toward the front desk area before, and the same view after. There's much more daylight coming to the lobby now because we were able to bring back a lot of those missing windows. And this is the last before and after shot. This is what the veranda had become over the years. It had been filled with offices, and they had been pushed all the way out to the front of the building. So standing in the same location today, this is what you see. The veranda has been brought back, and you can see all the detail and the Victorian charm of the original building. So with that, I know my time is up, and just say it was a great project to be involved in. This is the rest of the team that collaborated on the project. And if you're in San Diego or Coronado, you definitely need to come out and see it. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions when Morgan is done with his presentation.
Thank you, David. We will, as David mentioned, we will be taking questions for both at the end, and we encourage you to use the Q&A box whenever you'd like for those questions. Morgan, take it away. We look forward to hearing about the Proper Hotel in downtown LA.
I mean, first, I just want to say that was great to watch that whole process as you talk through it. So thank you for sharing that with us, David. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the Downtown LA Proper Hotel. It's located in the South Park District in downtown, and was originally built in 1926, Renaissance Revival style, and designed by Curlett and Beelman. It was originally built as the commercial club. It was a men's club located just across the street from the Herald Examiner and kind of down the street from the just main corridor of down Broadway and Spring Street, which was once called the Wall Street of the West. So here's a view from 1955. I'm just going to walk through like a large handful of before and after shots, looking at similar, almost the same view as much as we could get. Here's a view after construction, and I'll talk through the process along the way. There you can see a night view of the building. So the building is an existing non-ductile concrete high-rise building. And there is a mandatory non-ductile concrete retrofit ordinance in the city of LA, which we had to comply with. It meant a huge amount of structural coordination. We added 3 new shear walls that go from the basement all the way to the roof, and tried to hide them as best we could throughout the building. Here's a view intersection of 11th and Broadway downtown, looking at the original storefronts. That you can see. It was a streetcar that used to run in front, and all the streetcar wires you can see above. This is a view of when we started the project. So all those storefronts were gone. Obviously, the streetcar was gone, and the building had been continuously used throughout since 1926. But it was, I would say, heavily used and got a little beat up along the way. Here's a photo of us in the middle of restoring it. This project was just a short 8 years, so we got some good, I would say, progress photos that we're going to be looking through. So as I mentioned, it was originally designed for the commercial club, men's club. That unfortunately, since they started in 1926, they got hit just 3 years later with the Depression, and they really only lasted until 1933. It then became the Cabrillo Club, and shortly after became the Cabrillo Hotel. So they pivoted from a private men's club to a hotel. And then in the 50s, it became the Case Hotel and operated full-time as a hotel. Here are some of the original drawings. Unfortunately, we didn't have any amazing finds of original linen drawings in the basement or anything, but we were able to get some of the original drawings that the city had at the building department in their records. Unfortunately, they didn't have any of the plans, but they did have some of these hand-detailed elevations. So we were able to reference them and use them along the way. This is some drawings of the main facade along Broadway and the main entrance. Here is a 1933 view of the same archway that we were just looking at, hand drawing of. You can see the cartouche above and this arch with all terracotta paneling. And then to the left, you can see the original storefront with original transom windows above. Here's a 1950s view where they put a canopy over that arched opening so you can no longer see it. And they started to change some of that storefront. Then when we started, that canopy was still there on the building, hiding the arch. All of that terracotta paneling on the lower floors had been painted over, and the storefront had all been redone below that transom window, and the transom was all painted over. So along through the process, we were able to take out some of those original transom window panels and understand what type of glass was there, because we only had those couple of black and white photos. So there was originally an amber seeded glass that we were able to reuse and recreate for any missing panels. We rebuilt the steel storefront on the ground floor that was based on the original hand drawings that we had, but brought it up to Title 24 code. So you can see there's the amber seeded glass in the transom above. We reactivated there was a little awning box that was originally designed. So there's a retractable awning to match the original design. And you can see we've removed that non-original canopy in the archway to expose that. And then we were able to repair all the terracotta panels. And there's a little taxi cab entrance door, original door to the right, which we also were able to rebuild. Here's a closer view of that archway and original pink and white marble floor tile. Those are also the original bronze doors that were repaired. Here is some additional hand drawings of the 11th Street side, where we had a wrought iron canopy. This is the only old photo that we have of it, which is sometime in the 50s when there was a restaurant on the ground floor and there was a broken window. They took a picture of cleaning up the window, but it actually was really helpful for us to understand how the bulkhead worked, how the original storefront worked, and little view of that canopy beyond. This is the kind of shape it was in when we started. This entrance was infilled with mechanical ducts, and there was a original stair in that location, which had mechanical equipment on it blocking the stair, and lots of missing pieces in this canopy that we were able to cast and remake. Here's a final photo of that entire elevation with the new storefront and repaired canopy. New doors that match the original doors on Broadway. This is a historic tax credit project. So we took it through the process from nominating it to be a Los Angeles Historic Cultural Monument, then get it on the California Register and on the National Register. And then through that, we worked closely with the local Los Angeles Office of Historic Preservation and the California Office of Historic Preservation. Sorry, local was Office of Historic Resources. So all of these decisions were made in close collaboration with them. Here's a 1930s view looking up Broadway with an updated streetcar that unfortunately doesn't exist, but is in the works of being brought back. You can see the building in the distance on the left with a big Sunday Examiner sign. We believe it was the largest open panel roof sign on Broadway. And then in the 50s, it was that open panel sign was rebranded as the Case Hotel. You can see there's also some original painted wall signs which we were able to maintain. I would say maintain the original use of. So looking at this south facade, one of the locations where we had to put a new concrete shear wall was on the back side of this wall. So here's a before 2014 shot of that painted wall sign, really just a ghost sign at that point. Unfortunately, we had to cover it with a new concrete shear wall, but then we repainted a wall sign in its place with current advertising. To the right of that, you can see a new stair tower. One of the other things that we had to do was bring the building up to high-rise retrofit code. So we had to have 2 complete stairs that went from the basement to the roof. There was only partial stairs previously, and we, as you'll see later, we activated the roof, which required a new elevator to the roof, new gurney compliant elevator. So that's what that stair tower is to the right side. Here's a close-up view of that main entrance on Broadway with the condition that it was in when we started. And then final condition after a lot of repair. As we walk into the building, I should explain that we collaborated on this project with interiors firm Kelly Wersler. So while we designed all of the layout of the spaces and permitted all of the structural upgrade and coordinated all of the mechanical, all of the systems, and really the layout for the entire building, they worked on all the interior finishes that were not historic. So here's a 2013 view of the main lobby. The only things that appeared to be existing original were the wainscot on the left and this archway in the back. As we started to open things up, we found, things like this groin vault ceiling that we didn't know was there. And then on the right side where the elevators are, we could see that there used to be wood wall paneling like we saw in the previous photo, but it had been removed over time. So here's a complete photo. The archways have been restored. The groin vault ceiling has also been restored. This is a mural painted on that original ceiling by a local artist, Abel Macias. The pink and white marble flooring has also been carefully restored. Here's a view of the original wainscot. It was in pretty beat up shape. So it's been patched and repaired and then restained and refinished to match what was originally there. And then on the right side, we added additional paneling for locations where there was paneling that had been removed over time. Here's a close-up of some of the groin vaults. Here's a view of the inside of the lobby looking out, and you can see that we've opened up the wall on the left side in order to add that shear wall that I was talking about earlier. Finished lobby view. Here's a shot of the main hotel check-in desk. I'm gonna start to go a little bit faster because I realized that we're going out of time. Here's a close-up of the cartouche that we found, which was actually in very good shape. So we just worked around it. Main lobby. This is some janitor closet doors, but there weren't very many of these existing things left. So anything that we did find, we tried to keep. Here's some of the original hardware from the commercial club. We found only, I think, 8 or 10 of these doorknobs throughout the building, which I kept at my desk for about 8 years until they were ready to be installed and could be reused in the original doors. Here's the main restaurant as it was when we started and as it is today. Again, main restaurant opposite view and completed version. It was, like I said, changed many times over time, and we were able to peel everything back to anything that was original that was still there, and then as it was always a commercial space, it was redesigned by Kelly Wersler. There's some additional shots of that restaurant. As we go up the building, I'll think I'm going over time, so I'll try to go a little bit faster. Here's some interior shots on the second floor and a completed shot of the interior guest rooms. Again, some little bit of historic detailing that we found, and we were able to restore it. On the third floor, this floor was originally lounge and grill room for the members. Here's some interior elevations that we found. We didn't have any plans, so this is what we had to work with. Some pieces of original plasterwork that we were able to restore. Converted these grill room spaces to hotel rooms. Here's some non-original windows that we were able to replace to match existing adjacent original windows. There were some phone booths that we uncovered on the third floor and were able to repair all of this plasterwork. This is the fourth floor lobby entrance to this fourth floor dining room. It was an original space that was, the space was maintained, but it was being used as a cafeteria. So you can see that they've just put HVAC right in the middle of some rosette windows. We were able to uncover those, restore them, restore the ceiling. We found lots of things along the way that we weren't aware of, like the original floor, original ceiling above. We rerouted mechanical ducts within existing columns and repaired the floor. This is our team doing a walkthrough during the process. Here's that same ballroom in 1928 with the Association of Professional Baseball Players of America having their annual meeting. That same view today. Fifth floor elevator lobby, plaster restoration. Here's a shot from 1932, a men's group at the Cabrillo Club. You can see the plaster corbel heads in the distance. And there's another one in the back corner as well, above this captain's head. This is what we found when we got to the building. There were only a couple of these heads left, and they had been painted over with kind of creepy eyes and mustaches. We salvaged these, kept them at our office for a couple of years until they were ready to be reinstalled. Other details that we uncovered and were able to restore. The sixth floor had an original racquetball court that had been used as a basketball court over time. We kept that intact and turned it into one of our premier suites. The seventh floor had an original pool plunge with non-original tile. It had been enclosed when the building was converted to YWCA in the 60s with chain link fence. We restored the pool and turned it into a hotel guest room. So this hotel suite actually has an entire pool in their living room. That was mainly due to low ceilings and thinking wouldn't be an amazing spot for all the guests to come to, but instead turning the idea around and making it become a really special moment in the middle of the building. some original interior stairs that were repaired. The typical upper floor of the men's club had 126 very tiny guest rooms that we repaired, totally reworked. Here's a final view with the original windows, original moldings, repaired and replaced where missing. When we get to the roof, it was mostly an empty roof. There was an existing penthouse there that was really just a water tower. Some of the things that we have to do, or that we chose to do in order to offset the humongous structural costs, was to reactivate the roof or activate the roof as a restaurant and bar in order to find new ways for creating revenue. That existing water tower penthouse was turned into a bar and main entrance to the outdoor restaurant. Here's the interior of that space. And that same exact space renovated as a bar. It basically has 360-degree views all around downtown. The existing parapet was pretty tall, and you couldn't really see over it without climbing up. So in order to make that a more usable situation, we raised the deck so that the parapet height was exactly guardrail height, current code guardrail. We also worked closely with the Office of Historic Preservation to make sure that you couldn't see anything that we were adding on the roof from about a block away. So we pulled things back so that your sightline view of the parapet was blocking anything new that we're adding, or most of the things that we were adding. So here's a view of that original roof area. And then with that stepped step decking that we were looking at in the section. So you stand a block away and you actually can't see this raised deck or guardrail. This is just some shots of craning in a stainless steel pool onto the roof. And here's a final view of that roof deck. And I think I'll stop there just since we've gone so far over time.
Thank you, Morgan. I wanted to have David hop back on, and we'll take questions. I wanted you to continue on, Morgan. It was just such a fascinating project. So maybe we'll do a future program in more detail. Same with your project, David. It was just wonderful to see all the details. So I have a number of questions here that I've written down, but I'll start with one of the audience questions, and then also remind our audience that they can continue to use the Q&A box to ask these questions, and we'll have time to take them for the next 10 minutes. First question is from Betsy. She's asking, I think this is directed for Morgan, but this is probably a question for both of you. I know David mentioned that the originals were found in the basement, right? And then for Morgan, I think you said the originals were found at the city, in the city records. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, the city of LA keeps their records of really old buildings like this in a warehouse they have in Van Nuys. So we were lucky and we're able to find the original drawings, but that's not always the case with a lot of the buildings that we work on. But again, we had full structural plans and all the interior and exterior elevations, but no architectural floor plans. They were missing.
Oh. And David, the linens were found in the basement. Was it a complete set, or how extensive were those?
No, it wasn't a complete set, but we have, I'd say, close to 100 sheets. Many of them are just detail sheets. We only have reproduction copies of the floor plans, but they actually were found throughout the site in various, the paint building, the laundry building, the basement. So they really hadn't gathered them all together, and they didn't really know what they had until construction was going on. And it we were discovering new drawings every day, and they have their own historian on staff who would, send me a photo. What do you think this is? And I wish we had some of the drawings earlier than we had. It would have helped us a lot. But luckily, they confirmed most of what we had already established.
Such great presentations. David, Barbara was wondering if Pamela Burton was on the landscape.
Well, Burton Landscape Design, I don't know if the firm was founded by her or not, but we did not work with Pamela. We worked with other staff there, but I'm not sure who founded the firm.
Yeah, and there's some questions. One of the questions I wrote was about the tax credit process for the proper and the sightline for that parapet, the tower at the parapet, or behind the parapet, I guess I would say. And Dave was asking, is that parapet sightline restriction a historic one? Is that tied to the tax credits, or where in the process were you concerned that you needed to worry about the view line of that?
It was tied to the tax credits. Yeah, I mean, I could spend an hour just talking about that process. We originally had, one level deck that went all the way to the parapet with a glass guardrail, clear glass guardrail, similar to what they did at the Hotel Del. And then the Office of Historic Preservation in Sacramento was concerned about how much you were going to see. They really didn't want to see any additions from a block away. Really, that's about where they think about it. So they asked us to do a mock-up. We built a mock-up, and then they saw how much you really were going to see. Even though it was clear glass, they were worried about, you're seeing chairs and things like that. So they asked us to go back to the drawing board, and that's when we started drawing these diagonal lines and getting really nitty-gritty of like, how much would you actually see if we pull it back and things like that. So that was the compromise we ended up on, which actually ended up with a much more dynamic space than I think it would have been.
Morgan, this is a question for you. Dave was wondering, are the original terracotta details from Vladimir Bean?
That is a good question. I don't know for sure. We didn't have any record of it. We were making some estimates, good educated guesses, but we don't know for sure.
Now, I was curious, David, about the paint investigation that you did in terms of the color match, and noticing that the window frames were originally this reddish color. Now, how do you determine what the original color was? Because I would imagine that things like UV damage or just fading of the color could happen over time. So, is there some sort of science to that in terms of finding that original match?
Well, yes, it's partly science, partly just rudimentary dumb luck. The first thing you do is you try to find paint examples of the paint in protected areas. So, for instance, rather than if we were on the south facade, if I was to scrape the south part of the window, it would have been really exposed to a lot of the environment for 130 years, and probably would have been, degraded even before it was repainted. So the trick is you open the windows, you look for paint remnants on the inside of the casings where they've been, out of exposure areas, and they may have never been even repainted. Over the years, I've spent half an hour scraping a little thing, trying to reveal a little piece of the original paint, and then a half hour later, I find the window that's two down. I open it, and it's got a whole side of the style that's completely has the original paint on it. So I wasted my half hour because I didn't look carefully before I started. And so you just look for areas that are most protected. And the other thing to do is you can do a laboratory paint analysis, which isn't that expensive. It's only about $200 to $300 per color. And you send a little sample off to a laboratory. They cast it in resin, and they do a cross-section slice of it and look at it under a microscope. And they could not only tell what the original color is, they'll give you a color match, but they could also tell the difference between a primer coat and a final coat. And based on any weathering, they can tell you how long it was on the building, and if it has lead in it, how much lead, that usually tells you how old the paint layer is as well. So there are many ways to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if Emmy had a question.
Oh yeah, it was from Wayne. It's for David. He wanted to know if he was talking about being the Dell being the largest to be electrified. He says not by Thomas Edison, urban myth, but how about the original steam powered hydraulic elevators, one of the first fire sprinkler systems and telephone systems? And he's asking about tunnels as well. I don't know if you know about any of that.
Yeah, as part of this overall project, and the Dell is in the picture behind me. These buildings that are over in this area are the industrial buildings. There's the laundry building and the power plant and other kind of support structures, and those were actually restored prior to the project that we worked on, and we consulted on those. But there is a tunnel that connects between the power plant under the driveway and parking lot and gardens to the lower level of the main hotel, and that's been there since it was first built. It actually has utilities that run along the walls, and that is there, and it's still used by employees. And it's visible. If you were to tour the power plant, you could still see it. And there's all kinds of stories about, rendezvous and how that was a popular place for couples to hide. But it is part of the original building, and it's still there. As far as it is true that the Dell was one of the first fire sprinkler buildings in the country, which we're very thankful for, because a lot of these buildings are lost through fires. And this building had fireplaces in every room. You imagine 400 fireplaces and one irresponsible guest, you've lost the whole hotel. So they did replace the fireplaces with steam heat early on, and they removed all the fireplaces, which probably helped save the hotel.
Very cool. He was also wondering about the state historical building code, where he said where you have significant challenges with that, I'm guessing.
The rule on that is if it's new construction, you need to meet the current building code. But if you're adapting something or restoring something that's well documented, you can keep it. For instance, the stairs in the lobby are probably steeper than are allowed by code, and they don't have the guardrail extensions that are required by code. But the California Historical Building Code, thankfully, allows for exceptions to the code as long as they don't create a distinct hazard. And so there were some elements like that enabled us to keep historic items. And the other thing too is if this was a new building, there'd be a requirement for ADA in order for wheelchairs to go right up basically the front entry. And we felt it was important to recreate the original wood stairs, but we immediately adjacent to that, we did introduce the new ramp, which gets people within 3 feet of where the stairs would have gotten them. And so that strictly doesn't comply with ADA, but because it's a historic building, we have more flexibility there.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to roll 2 questions into one here. Teresa is asking about the OHP and NPS and the tax credit process, specifically as in regards to the interior. So, and that was part of the question that Reem was asking as well, is how did you approach Kelly with the interior design? Didn't you want it more historic? I personally love the interior. I think it's a great interpretation. Probably not strictly historic, obviously, but maybe you can comment on how that interacted with the tax credit process, Morgan.
Sure. So we approached it as a rehabilitation project, and we worked with our historic consultant, Tara Homaker, and we basically documented every inch of the building. I think it's like a 200-page document, our part 2 tax credit application, where we took, floor by floor, space by space, photographs of any original historic fabric that we found, like the elevator door surround, for example. And then we described the condition that it was in, or level of disrepair, and then described what we were going to do. So there's so much that I couldn't get into there, but let's say for the elevator doors where we had to, cover them with smoke curtains or with wand doors, depending on the floor. we described that whole situation. And then, working with Kelly, we made sure that all of those elements were protected or repaired or rebuilt where missing. And we viewed things that she did, like paint, as reversible. But we wouldn't really let her make any other changes other than painting things. And lots of furniture, very large amount of furniture, and large amount of, I think we have over 120 different new tile types in the building, for example. But anything that was original, we wouldn't let her change. So then at the end of that whole process, Tara came back and photographed all those same exact things to see, so that we could show them the before and after. And I think it was actually successful from that point of view.
Great.
So even though there's a crazy painted mural, it is just paint.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I mean, the combination, it's fantastic.
We were really happy about that space.
Completely agree. Both great, wonderful projects, and there's a reason they won design awards. So kudos to both of you and the whole teams. The whole set of teams. One thing before I close out here, David, I don't know if you mentioned it anywhere, but who did the stained glass work?
Yeah, stained glass work was done by a local company called Barra Stained Glass Studio.
Okay. Yeah, I think you did.
And they are in, they're in North San Diego County, and they do a lot of not only restoration of historic work, but they do replica stained glass windows. So they did both for us.
Okay, well, with that, we're going to close out here. Mention that you can find the recordings by visiting youtube.com/calpreservation or facebook.com/capreservation, and we'll email you the link after the conclusion of today's program. Also, in the chat box, I put a link to leave feedback about today's program. I'm sure our speakers would love to hear how they did today, so I'll send that information to them. And I wanted to thank you both for your time today. A reminder that our last event for the series of Design Award programs is this Thursday. This will be our capstone closing event, which highlights all the award-winning projects. And that'll be an hour in length from 6 to 7 p.m. And we have some special guests that I won't reveal here, but we look forward to seeing you on Thursday evening. So thank you, David, and thank you, Morgan, and we'll see you at the next program.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.